The U.S. House of Representatives has voted through a series of measures regulating the sale of guns, but which are destined to fail in the Senate. The new measures would bar sales of semi-automatic weapons to people under 21 and ban large-capacity magazines. But Republican opposition in the Senate means the bill has little chance of entering law, despite a renewed focus on gun control in the wake of a series of mass shootings in the U.S. During the hearing of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on Wednesday morning, a young student, Maya Cerillo, who survived the mass shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde, appeared in a pre-recorded video. She was among a group of witnesses who testified before House lawmakers at a hearing on gun violence, recalling how she smeared the blood of a classmate on herself to appear as if she were dead. Democratic Rep. Caroline Maloney of New York, the committee's chairwoman, said the witnesses have endured pain and loss and displayed incredible courage by coming to ask lawmakers to do their jobs.
Have is widespread access to guns. That includes assault weapons, which were designed to kill as many enemy soldiers on the battlefield as possible, as quickly as possible. Yet in many states, these weapons of war can be purchased by an 18-year-old just by walking into a store. Assault weapons were used in the recent massacres in Buffalo, Texas, and Tulsa, just as they were in Parkland, Newtown, San Bernardino, Orlando, Las Vegas, and so many other mass shootings. These weapons have no place in our communities. No civilian needs an assault rifle, and the Second Amendment does not protect the right to own a weapon of war.
And we have joining us on the news via Zoom, Dr. David Townsend, who is a lawyer in Maryland, U.S. Good to have you join us.
Thank you, Gertrude. Good to be up here, and thank you for inviting me to your show. I really appreciate it.
So let's talk about the fact that in the House of Reps, a law has now been passed for stricter gun control, but it is likely not to survive at the Senate, where there is where the Democrats have more opposition. Why do you think that Republicans feel little pressure or little political pressure in terms of passing stricter gun laws?
Well, I think it's the narrative of this is what do you prefer? Do you prefer to move toward no law at all or too much law? And how do you think about that as a citizen? Because I would say that neither is a very good solution to the problem. So the narrative that we hear, and it's often based on a recent terrible event, such as the shooting in Maryland, my state, what is really the cause of that? And we look for a technological solution to the problem that will cure us of this kind of tragedy. I don't think that there is a technological solution. As a lawyer, I would say that law, as an American lawyer, I would say that law only works when the people are supporting that law, when we support the principles and the values and the ideals of the country that are behind the legal process. One of your commentators referred to the Constitution and the role of the Constitution. So that is what makes this nation what it is. We believe that everyone is endowed with inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And we believe, we hold this truth that we're all created equal. And that enables us to be self-governing rather than to be governed by terror, fear, power, tyranny, which I submit is the way that the world has been governed for most of its history. And indeed, I would say the contemporary world is governed in many cases more by tyranny than by the people and by rights. So I think the narrative is different. As a lawyer and a former prosecutor, I've learned to be a little humble about making judgments when I don't really have all the facts. It's good to investigate the facts And it's good to trust the judicial system in a criminal case to do that as best that it can, not that it always does it perfectly. So we're talking about different kinds of criminal cases.
Well, in this case, Dr. Townsend, in this case, can we say that self-governance has worked? When you look at the level and the rate of crime in the U.S., for example, a state like New York that has more or stricter gun laws seems to have lesser gun violence and death by gun. So why shouldn't there be laws to ensure that people do not take laws into their hands? Let's not also forget it's not just about killing others, it's also about gun suicide as well.
Sure. I'm about 30,000 deaths by gun in the United States last year. 20,000 about of those were suicides. So we're looking at a violent situation. I don't know whether I can blame, again, we're looking for a technological solution to what seems to me to be a moral problem and a problem of law. So there are only really two ways to solve problems in this world. You can do it by law, or you can do it by violence and force. And that problem has been going on for a long time, at least as I understand it, between the brothers Cain and Abel. So, Abel got angry at Cain, and what was the result? Murder. And that's usually the case in most gun deaths in the United States. This particular incident in Uvalde was, the kid was crazy, right? But that's not the way most murders occur. The most murders occur by an escalation of an argument, by basically wrath, envy, greed, lust, which turns violent. So what are we doing as a society in order to address those ancient problems? And it doesn't seem to be that that's the level on which the narrative is occurring. I don't think that we can prevent evil completely. And I don't think there's a technological solution to it. So we can try to make things better, and we should. But to think that all we have to do is get rid of guns. In the state of Maryland, it's very difficult to get a handgun, almost impossible. And yet, in my city, my home city of Baltimore, there were 340 murders last year, 340. And a lot of those were children. Way too many were children. We have very, very strict laws, and yet we still have this, which I think would be a fairly outrageous problem in cities of some countries, which are less violent than the United States. So it doesn't look like the technological solution is the narrative that I would want to pay attention to. I think we need a moral revolution. What are the answers to
even
that,
with they have been, Dr. Townsend, if I may just jump in, and I'd like to start from where you mentioned Cain and Abel, and you referred to that scripture in the Bible. But even shortly after that, God gave the commandment, which is the 10 Commandments. So even after that, there was the need for the law, which shows the importance of laws. And let's also look at countries where you've had gun laws. For example, in Australia, the Australian National Firearms restricted the use of firearms by civilians. And then shortly after that, that has been credited with less mass shooting in Australia. Just in South Africa, the rate of violence deaths dropped after the Firearms Control Act of 2000. So why is America not looking to countries like this, even just in Israel and Switzerland, to see how their firearms laws are helping reduce the rate of mass shooting?
Well, as I said, we have very strict firearm laws in Maryland. And as you pointed out in your news broadcast, with which you began the show, we had what is characterized as a mass shooting, 4 people. Shot just yesterday or the day before. So it doesn't seem to follow that that's how you necessarily prevent it. I'm not saying that we should make it easy. I certainly don't think crazy people should have guns, and we should certainly have a system which stops that from happening. But if you want to just look at the statistics on things, here's the thought: we have a transportation system in the United States that kills 42,000 people a year and maims another 2 million. And we're okay with that? 100 years from now, are people going to look at us and say, what were you thinking? So in terms of numbers of deaths and numbers of innocent deaths, it's the automobile. Should we therefore ban automobiles? I don't think the Americans would put up with that, or neither would anybody else. And why is that? You know, what is it about our culture which focuses so much on greed and wrath and envy? And how do you mitigate those problems? It seems to me you do it by cultivating patience.
Because it's
and
interesting.
gratitude.
It's interesting the point you're making. I think what I hear is that you're saying it is not guns that kill people, but Americans with guns that kill people. So what exactly do you think would likely lead to sweeping reforms in terms of gun violence?
So again, I think the narratives, I don't think we're looking for an easy technological solution, and I don't think there is one. I think that you can make a gun in your garage. Okay, so you can try to control it, but you're going to lock down the society in such a way. And again, I'm not against gun laws, and I'm certainly not against background checks and trying to keep guns out of the hands of violent and crazy people. But we're not, we don't seem to be doing that very well in spite of the laws that we have in the states that, for example, Maryland, which have very strong gun laws. So I would just say, think about the narrative. Think about what one is assuming, that there is this easy solution to the problem. And some of this, and I'm sorry to say this, Gertrude, this is nothing personal, okay? But some of it's exacerbated by the nature of the media. So the media is looking for a story that has legs in order to distract us and stimulate us. And the purpose of that, ultimately, I would say, is to increase your market share. You know that if I watch your show, and you can come up with a story that has legs and goes on. And here's a recent one. You mentioned two of them, several of them. Certainly, what's going in Congress will increase market share for the news. So we have to think about the maybe unintended consequences of the kinds of
Dr. Townsend, America is an outlier when it comes to gun violence. It has one of the highest rates of gun violence in the world. We'll see how the U.S. continues to deal with this issue and reduce the level of mass shooting. Thank you so much for talking to us, Dr. David Townsend, a lawyer in Maryland, U.S.
Thank you, Gertrude.